All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, Sagar, as you were just discussing, the New York Times just ran a big article on their swing state general election head-to-head polling, and here's the headline. 1 year from election, Trump trails Biden but leads Warren in battlegrounds. Missing, as usual, is any mention of the candidate with the most donors and the biggest rallies, one Bernard Sanders. Now, if you read the article, you'll find out that according to that New York Times polling, Bernie is even with Trump nationally, beats him in Michigan, and is essentially tied with him in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Bernie outperforms fellow progressive Warren in every swing state save Arizona. Now, you might think that the fact that the guy who confidently embraces the term democratic socialist, a term which we have been assured for decades is certain electoral death, is doing better than media darling Warren and is not too far behind Mr. Electability himself, Joe Biden, would be fairly headline worthy. But, of course, the remarkable fact that everything we've been led to believe about electability is wrong did not work with the simplistic narrative the Times was selling that Warren was unelectable because she's too far left. Or you could take this Texas general election head-to-head poll. Now, this one doesn't have great news for Dems overall. It finds all of them falling short of Trump. But the one who comes closest is Green New Deal loving, Medicare for all pushing Bernie Sanders. He even outperforms native son Beto O'Rourke. Now, these polls are especially noteworthy since there's reason to believe that Bernie's coalition is particularly hard to poll. His whole strategy hinges on turning out new, young voters and working-class, infrequent voters. Those folks aren't likely to show up in a pollster's likely voter model and may not even be registered yet. Kind of sits awkwardly with the narrative we are always hearing, that to win, you have to run to the center. So again, rather than deal with that, it's easier to just press ignore. Now, the conventional wisdom axiom of electability is simply that the further left a candidate is, the less electable. This is just obviously incorrect. You can look at Sanders, certainly the furthest left candidate we've had in recent history, polling quite well against Trump, or alternatively, consider Hillary Clinton or Al Gore or John Kerry, all paragons of centrist virtue, none president of these United States. So what then is a new working theory of electability? Well, first of all, humans are really quite bad at analyzing facts and data. Plans and math and rationality are just simply not our strong point, though, Yang Gang, I certainly appreciate your commitment to such things. We do, however, have a highly attuned bullshit detector. That's why breaking the cardinal rule of politics and admitting that you will in fact raise middle-class taxes, a la Bernie Sanders, is forgivable, while weaseling around before finally settling on a plan that gets you off the hook of having to say those unpalatable words is really not. Better to say something that voters don't like than to say some bullshit. This is frankly part of Trump's appeal. He says all kinds of crazy stuff no one would tell you to say, but people read that as being honest simply because of the fact that you really shouldn't say it. It's kind of like the socialist label. Every political consultant would tell you to take the Warren route and call it economic patriotism or capitalism for those who want it or whatever, just as long as you don't use the S word. Bernie's authentic embrace of it is appealing because it reads as honest rather than typical politician weaseling. So that's one element. But I will say ideology is not irrelevant. And this is the part where the media and the Democratic establishment are particularly confused. Meet Mr. Leon Cooperman. He's a billionaire who's been in a weird ongoing fight with Elizabeth Warren because she believes in taxation, but I can assure you he also has no use for Bernie Sanders. Just listen to his latest comments explaining how wonderful and great and productive billionaires are, such that they most certainly deserve the rewards of having more money than one could spend in a lifetime, while working-class Americans are treated as inhuman, disposable cogs who apparently deserve misery, struggle, and addiction.
And the idea of vilifying wealthy people is so bogus. You know, they're appealing to the masses. Every billionaire I know made their billions by providing a productive, useful service or product. And that's why they made their money. And then they take that money and they give it back to society.
Let me be clear. There is no amount of leftist bashing of this man and his ilk which would not be popular. You could not possibly be too radically, aggressively opposed to this man and everything that he stands for. It is all justified, needed, and by the way, it's electoral gold. This translates both into policies that help the working class obtain some modicum of the dignity that he believes they're unworthy of, and also policies that are directly punitive of him, like a wealth tax, for an example. Is a wealth tax feasible? Probably, if properly implemented, but that's really not the point. The electoral point is that it is a delightful part of a populist soak-the-rich agenda that garners mass support across the ideological spectrum. As part of Pelosi's clueless comments deriding Medicare for all and other progressive priorities, she specifically commented that while a wealth tax may be popular in a liberal enclave like San Francisco, she found it hard to believe it would go over well in the Rust Belt. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The wealth tax is a class-focused policy, and as such, it will be far more popular in working-class strongholds like the Midwest than in the wealthy liberal enclaves where Pelosi resides. More electorally challenging, however, are the liberal cultural issues that wealthy liberals like Pelosi are much more comfortable with. These are the types of policies which won't affect the bottom line of the wealthy and their allies in the striving upper middle class. Now, I'm not saying that you can't or shouldn't be in the right place on these issues, but if you lead with them, or if your liberalism is the Beto O'Rourke model of basically virtue signaling plus letting the rich continue to win their class war unabated, you will fail just as hard and as fast as Beto did. Or think about Kamala announcing her gender pronouns at a CNN town hall and embracing a plastic straw ban while failing to prosecute Steve Mnuchin's bank for foreclosure fraud. On the other hand, everyone knows, well, everyone who isn't an obnoxious hater knows, that Bernie Sanders supports the LGBTQ community, but I would fall over if I heard him announce his gender pronouns. He simply doesn't go through the motions of performative elite woke signaling. Elizabeth Warren, on the other hand, has her pronouns in her Twitter profile. So look, there's no exact formula to any of this, but in general, my rules of thumb for electability are this. Listen to your BS detector, embrace class war, and tread lightly with the woke signaling. Something tells me I'm not going to see that in a New York Times headline anytime soon. Sagar, this is the part, there are different kinds of left.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is the piece that people don't understand.
It's so funny. I almost did my entire monologue on this, which is that it was.
We're spending too much time together.
I know, which is because I went through and I looked at this data.
Yeah.
First of all, reducing or not doing the head-to-heads of Biden and Sanders voters and seeing what the overlap there. Ridiculous, right? I mean,
right.
the guy
so
wins.
Fascinating.
The guy wins more swing states than Elizabeth Warren does, and yet that doesn't warrant it. But I digress. What they're getting at is they're like, oh, what is too far left? Because in their mind, they can't understand being too far left on cultural issues and then being too far left on economic issues. I guarantee that if you split that apart and you ask them about things like wealth taxes or about health care, these things would poll overwhelmingly amongst these Trump voters. It's on the cultural issues, which Warren in particular has leaned into, like immigration, political correctness. Actually buried at the very bottom of this story is a paragraph about Biden voters who won't vote for Elizabeth Warren. And all of them are culturally conservative on immigration, culturally conservative on political correctness, and believe that their race has had something to do with discrimination in the workplace. They're white. And so it's like these are the issues which obviously Elizabeth Warren is leaning the most into on social justice, and that's why she's not winning in any of these states.
Well, and that's part of it too, is you can be in the right place on all these. Like Bernie Sanders is in the same place as Elizabeth Warren on all these issues. But a lot of it is what you lead with and what seems to be the matter of emphasis. And I think that's the piece that they don't understand. You know, there's a lot of sort of elaborate performance around signaling that you're in the right place on these cultural issues. And that can be very off-putting to a large segment of the population. Now, you may wish it wasn't that way, but that is the reality, especially in these industrial Midwestern states where people feel, and I think that this is legitimate. I don't think this comes from an ugly place. People feel that they've been condescended to. They feel like they've been looked down upon because maybe they didn't know the right gender pronoun or exactly the right word to use. This should be a party that is welcoming of people who are coming from things from the right place, who have their hearts open, even if they don't know exactly what the woke signaling of the day is.
It's so funny. There's actually a column in the New York Times this morning talking about the use of the word Latinx or Latinx or however the heck you want to call it. Now, Elizabeth Warren uses this in order to describe Latinos in America.
Right.
And it turns out polling indicates 98% of Latinos do not want to be referred to as Latinx.
Right.
And yet, who are the people who coined this term and who propagate it? Ivy League professor liberals, white liberals, upper middle class liberals. So who is she trying to appeal to whenever she uses this term?
Right.
It's not Latinos. It's white, upper middle class white people to show that she's an ally of that community. When, if you look at the polling, who's polling better? Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And guess what terms they're not using? That's what that is the perfect encapsulation of the woke signaling.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting is actually it was non-white Biden voters who were less likely to support Warren. So even the people that you're trying to, well, you're absolutely right. She's actually not trying to signal them.
No.
She's trying to signal to her own class.
Yes.
But even the people that, it seems like you're trying to appeal to aren't really down for it.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you see Hillary Clinton didn't have the turnout that she should have among minority communities, and she did all of this stuff
And
perfectly.
this is exactly why.
Next up on Rising, does Pete Buttigieg's sexuality hurt his ability to attract African-American voters?
YouTuber Tim Black is going to join us now to discuss that and all of the latest 2020 news. That when Rising continues.